Okay, welcome to our New York Giants Preservation Society meeting for tonight, Wednesday, July 9th, with Jason Horowitz. Jason contributed to this great Saber book, Willie Mays' Five Tools. Um, he is he is going to be speaking of Willie Mays, um, all-time All-Star, and the reason we're doing that is because next week is the All-Star game. In the next 2 weeks, both meetings will also be on Wednesday. Next Wednesday, we'll have Stu Thornley talking about Carl Hubble and his striking out of the Hall of Famers at the Polo Grounds. And the following week, we will have Alex Pavlovich. Alex has a brand new book out about the history of the San Francisco Giants, and he's a beat writer. So it's going to be a week before the trade deadline. So we'll be talking about his book and then, the open forum. You could ask him whatever you would like. But for now, I'm going to turn oh, look at that. Jeff has the book already. Pre-ordered it. Jeff, by the way, I think it's a series of books. I've seen one on the Braves and other teams. So,
Okay.
but
Well, yep, this was sent to me, so
Alex,
glad to read it.
Alex will be great. But also who will be great is Jason Horowitz. So why don't we give it up for Jason Horowitz? Jason, thank you so much for coming tonight. The floor is yours. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
I
my pleasure. My pleasure. I'm trying to get the. I haven't shared a screen for a while, so as
Yep,
usual,
I just gave you the screen. If you can do it, you can. If you can't, you can't.
I think I can.
There you go.
Is that working?
That looks great.
Okay. Um, well, look, let me say that it's an honor to be invited to speak to this group. I've had the pleasure of attending a couple of your many meetings, and um, again, the level of the presenters is fantastic. I'll do my best to be worthy of that, of that level. And I love the conversation. Uh, as Gary mentioned, I'm speaking about my article or my chapter that was part of the Willie Mays Five Tools book that was published by Saber last year. I think you had a few of the other authors of that book come and speak. It's a great book, and I encourage you to purchase it. But it's also true that most, if not all, of the articles are available on the Saber site, including my own. So it's something to think about. Um, I'm going to actually go back to that first slide because I want to talk about that picture. Um, I mean, Willie Mays. Well, let me tell you about the picture. The picture is from the 1959 All-Star game. That was one of the years when there were two games, and the second game that year was played at the LA Coliseum. And that's where this picture was taken. If you squint, you can see the kind of the portico that's part of the open end of the LA Coliseum. Um, and in the picture, I managed to accidentally crop Charlie Neal, but you can see here Henry Aaron, Ted Williams, Stan Musial, and Willie Mays. So, uh, wait, the article when you read it, or if you have read it, has a lot of detail about all of the games. But the basic point is that Willie Mays was the ultimate all-star. He exhibited statistical dominance that is just unmatched. He holds or co-holds a number of very significant all-star records, games played, at bats, total bases, stolen bases, triples, etc. Um, Second point that I would make about his All-Star performance is that it equaled his performance in the regular season. His slash line was remarkably close to his actual kind of career regular season slash line, and that was against the best pitchers that the AL had at the time. So in other words, he upped his game for the All-Star game. Um, and then of course there were many signature moments. He won two awards, um, and he's credited with a single year cycle in 1960. That was across two games. I'm not sure. I think that may be stretching the definition of the cycle a little bit, but still pretty remarkable. I think he went something like 8 for 10 that year, and also had nine fielding putouts, nine center field putouts. So that's one reason why I think it's worth remembering Willie's performances in the All-Star game, just because he was so damn good uh, in those games, and for really for a tremendous number of years. Again, his 24 games were played, I think, in 20 years, and uh, that's actually probably a good bridge to the next slide, which is, again, why was this significant and meaningful? Why was his All-Star game excellence significant and meaningful? And part of it was that at the time, as I think probably everybody on this call remembers, there was much more limited TV, or no cable TV, limited national and or regional TV coverage, no interleague play. So the All-Star game offered, often the only chance for the entire country to see a whole group of players. I mean, I missed most of Willie's career, but I kind of grew up. My baseball awakening happened in the sort of early and mid '70s, and man, the All-Star game felt really special. You got to see. I grew up. I'm uh, calling you from Washington, D.C., which is where I grew up. Most of the time I was growing up, I was a Baltimore Orioles fan, but didn't see any National League games until I moved to New York City in my late teens, early 20s. And so the All-Star game was super special. Um, the second thing was that you know Willie Mays' success was kind of a symbol of the National League dominance, which started around the time he began playing. When he played his first All-Star game, I don't remember the precise numbers. It's in the article, but the American League had a significant advantage in win-loss in the All-Star game up through the mid 1950s. And by the time his All-Star game career ended in the early 70s, the National League was well into its era of dominance. Again, when I was growing up, the National League won pretty much every year, and that was that was a source of frustration for an American League fan. Um, and the again, the reasons for the National League dominance have been kind of written about and documented. Well, a lot of it was fueled by its kind of much more proactive integration of Black and Afro-Latino players, Black Caribbean players in that era. And of course, the Giants were one of the teams at the forefront of that. Um, and then a kind of a final point I would make about with the significance of Willie Mays in the All-Star game was that he was a bridge between vastly different generations of baseball players. In his first All-Star game, he was not a starter. He was a reserve, and he actually replaced Jackie Robinson um, in the field. I think he and played for the rest of the game. And Rod, I think again, like I said, that was Jackie Robinson's last game. Um, and the span of his All-Star experience, in the early 50s, he played alongside Stan Musial, who had played his first All-Star game in 1940. And in 1972-73, he played against Carlton Fisk. Um, and Carlton Fisk had a long career, as I think probably everybody here remembers. And Carlton Fisk's final All-Star game was in 1991. Um, so to me, it's just amazing to think of that span of that sort of once removed span of 1940 to 1991. That's a half a century of baseball excellence. Um, so I kind of wanted to this is like this is a 5-page article, so material is not endless. This would be a relatively short presentation. Wanted to share a couple of photos um, of Willie Mays playing at the All-Star game. The one on the left is more probably kind of more globally significant because this was a catch that Willie regarded as his All-Star game highlight. I don't believe he started that game either. He came in as a defensive replacement. But in the seventh inning, this again, as the caption says, this happened in Milwaukee in 1955. In the seventh inning, with the National League trailing 5-0, Willie Mays made a kind of over the wall catch that saved runs, and the National League came back and won in extra innings. And he regarded it as his All-Star game highlight. The picture on the right is from the 1969 All-Star game that took place in Washington, D.C. As a Washington baseball fan, that game has significance to me. Actually, right now, we're having a kind of violent and torrential thunderstorm, which in fact happened and delayed that game by a day. But that was also 1969 was observed as the 100th anniversary of professional baseball. The first, the kind of the putative first professional baseball team was the 1869 Cincinnati Red Stockings. And Major League Baseball observed it as such, and they actually had they invited the top players, the top like 75 or so players to DC and had a banquet. Uh, Sounds very quaint as a way to observe a major milestone. And Again, this picture shows Willie with Leo DeRocher, who was at the time manager of the Chicago Cubs, but had been Willie Mays' first manager, and Gil Hodges, who obviously he played against when Hodges, well, with all of Hodges' teams, with the Brooklyn Dodgers and then later the Mets and so forth. So I thought that was that I hadn't seen that picture before. That's not one that gets around a lot. So wanted to share that. Um, Actually, kind of maybe as a way to stimulate some conversation, do people remember what artifact that was created for the 1969 Major League Baseball season is still kind of part of the scene, is still used by MLB?
The one thing I remember, I think, from this game was I think Willie McCovey hit 2 home runs.
He did. He did. The game was postponed because of a thunderstorm. They had to play it the next day. And the field was very soggy. But yes, McCovey did hit 2 home runs.
Was it the player logo that was created for that game?
It wasn't for the game, but that was what I meant. It was the
Yeah.
player logo was created for the 100th anniversary of baseball and has stuck around ever since. They've kept it ever since.
And Jason, is that in fact Harmon Killebrew? A lot of people think that the Major League logo is Harmon Killebrew.
Oh, is it Harmon Killebrew?
That's what I heard. I don't know.
It is.
It is, Norm?
Yeah.
I did not know that. That's cool. I mean, I mean that. I mean the NBA logo is famously Jerry West.
Right.
I did not know. I did not know about Harmon Killebrew. Very cool. Um, so that was my article. Ted Williams said they invented the All-Star game for Willie Mays. I think that is, kind of the facts make it clear that that is true. Ted Williams was not exaggerating, and really it's a remarkable lifetime accomplishment. Um, I'm actually curious again, given that my presentation wasn't all that long, we have a ton of time. I mean, sort of
Got
first of all,
plenty of questions for you. Don't worry.
okay, good. Well, I'm happy to answer any questions for me.
All
I
right,
was gonna,
let's take the screen back.
okay.
All right,
Let me-
Jason, first of all, again, best way to get this is through Sabre or through Amazon, correct? Your book.
Correct. Right. I
So
mean,
let me ask you a couple of questions regarding the book, and then okay, I'm sorry if I interrupt you. Go ahead.
yeah. Let me just. I mean, yes. The best you can order it on Amazon. If you are a Sabre member, and I'm gonna guess that some of you are, you can actually download any of their books in PDF or Kindle format if you want to say just read it on an iPad. And you can also order it. I think that the member ordering price is probably a little cheaper than on Amazon. Just
But Jason, I have a couple of questions. I assume you did not know this book was coming out. You did the article maybe prior to the book, correct?
no, actually I had contributed to another Saber effort. And I was kind of looking around for something else to write. And I mean, again, Sabre is very, very active in its publication program. They have a number of people who identify topics that are of interest, and then they actually, in some cases, they go out and they say, okay, they come up with an outline, and then they look for people who are, have the time and the ability to write the articles.
So Sabre came up with the idea for the book, and you came
Yes,
up with the idea for the contribution.
correct.
Okay. I want to ask you a couple of questions regarding Willie Mays. When he played on the Giants, he batted third. McCovey batted fourth. I got to see his last few appearances in the All-Star game, whether he, um, was voted on or just was sort of like Kershaw this year. But usually he batted leadoff. Am I correct on that? During the 60s, in your research, was he usually batting third, or was the leadoff thing basically his position whenever the game did take place?
I think it was an all-star game thing, not a regular season thing. And I'm not really, my guess is that compared to, other sluggers, other sluggers, he probably had very high batting average and on base percentage. So
Made sense for him to bat leadoff because he was so fast.
yeah, I think that's right.
And much different from you is, you're an American League fan. I was brought up in a National League home. So during the 70s, I mean, I used to love watching the game because the National League won every year. Games were thrilling. Remember the first one? I remember seeing highlights from the McCovey game, but then the next year was the Ray Fosse incident, and with Pete Rose. So that's when I really started, watching, and the National League would win every year. And sometimes on Facebook, you get these feeds, and they're doing introductions to the teams, just the starting lineups. And my God, the National League and the American League, but the National League, so many Hall of Famers where it was just an incredible event. Now I can't even watch the game anymore. It's basically unwatchable.
Well, I mean, I think there are a number of reasons for that, but I mean, the fact, interleague play has kind of robbed the specialness from it. Um, and yeah, I mean, I just think the culture is that it's more of an exhibition now. I think if anything, people remember home run derby. Uh, I mean, I'm actually curious whether other people feel differently, but I mean, I mostly don't, I pay some attention to the selections, and maybe I'll watch the highlights of home run derby, and I'll watch the player introductions, and then that's about it. I'm not I'm out after that.
I used to love getting that ballot where you'd poke it in with your pencil.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I remember Billy Grabarkowitz, I think, was, written in for some, on the Dodgers. But my one last question for you, what is the future? What are you working on as far as writing?
I'm focusing now more on the business of baseball. I'm writing a kind of an ownership history of the current iteration of the Washington Nationals, the modern Washington Nationals. I actually did, I became a National League fan after I moved away from DC initially. And I followed the Mets for many years because I was living in New York. I actually lived in the Bay Area for a few years, and had a ticket plan the final year of Candlestick Park, known as 3Com Park at the time, in San Francisco. So I got to experience a little bit of Bay Area baseball as they like to call it. Uh, for the last 20 years or so, I've kind of when I was really really young, my first ever game was a Washington Senators game. So sort of like once a Senators fan, always a Washington fan. So when they brought the Expos, when the Expos moved to DC and became the Nationals, I started following them.
What do you think of the events that transpired a couple of days ago with them?
Well, I mean, I think that it was a long time coming. It was, the timing is very odd going, right before the draft and the trade deadline. Uh, but the assistant GM who's been promoted seems like he knows what he's doing. So I'm gonna hope for the best.
And I got to tell you, before I turn it over to Mars, that Juan Soto trade, what a steal for the Nationals. Boy, they got some great players coming on.
Well, they did. Hopefully, that we down here, we just hope they can hang on to them. And look, Juan Soto is a great player too. I don't know if he's going to be 16 years worth of great for the or however many years he signed with the Mets, but you'll be paying him. Bobby Bonilla will be a quaint footnote when you'll still be paying you'll still be paying Juan Soto, but
Right.
but he's a great player right now, and he's only what 26 years old.
I like the haul the Nationals got. They got some. That guy Wood is really good, and
Wood is
Moore
really
is good,
nice.
and Abrams, that's good young talent you
Abs
got for him.
a- Absolutely. Wood reminds me of Darryl Strawberry. I'll say that to a Mets audience here. Was always enjoyed watching Darryl in his prime years. They weren't too many of them, but he has some of that same smoothness, and
Right.
he's also very long, like Darryl was.
Jason, thanks so much for answering my questions and coming aboard. Mars, you're first.
Thank you, Jason, for joining us. I respect all researchers that delve into the history of this sport. I want to point out that my great uncle Lou Breslow produced Home Run Derby, and my, I guess, third or fourth cousin Craig Breslow is the president of baseball operations for the Boston Red Sox. Thankfully to him, he gave us Devers, which I hope he could produce a little bit more. I want to ask you, I just watched the Jim Thorpe Greatest Athlete of the 20th Century, which brings into an interesting question about what they call the GOAT, the greatest of all time. How could one judge the greatest of all time from the 19th century to modern times? And how would you judge and weigh the greatest of all times?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I mean, one of the really fun things about being a baseball fan is being able to kind of like engage in these discussions and arguments over players of one era versus players of another era. And I don't like I'm again, my personality is such that I don't feel sort of strongly that I have to come to a strong I don't have to come to a strong opinion on that. I just for me personally. Um, I think I think the arguments that Willie Mays was the GOAT, the greatest of all time, are solid and are based on statistics, both regular kind of like normal baseball card type statistics and more advanced statistics that have been derived since. And I'm kind of happy to go with that. But again, I'm going to be wishy-washy here. I'm going to say I can see the arguments for a number of other players too. You know, and it the further away you get in time, the harder it gets to make those comparisons. So like Jim Thorpe, for instance, I mean, who knows? I mean, he was obviously a great athlete, but the time was so different that it's just you can compare a season or two, but you can't really say all that much about someone like his career. I don't think he didn't play enough baseball that I think he's seriously in that conversation. But I mean, I guess I'll just stop. I mean, I could just sort of start mentioning the names, the Babe Ruths and Ty Cobbs and Ted Williams um, and so forth. But let's just this is a Willie Mays program. Let's go with Willie.
I agree. Thank you, Jay.
Thanks, Mars. Bill Clink, you're up.
Thank you very much, Jay. You bring back great memories because the Midsummer Classic is, well, not as classic today, but it always was. And I wanted to share a couple of memories with the two Midsummer Classics I saw in person. And I would hope that Norm and John and others might chime in with their memories of actual games where they were there. Um, and I should say, I don't have any relatives in baseball that I can hearken to like Mars can, but I did stay at a Holiday Inn last night. Um, um, I saw the '61 All-Star game. My two memories of that,
Which
yes,
which
I
which
remember
one?
seeing at Candlestick, um, upper deck, way left field, so, it's an area where, yeah, you'd get some wind. You know what I remember? It wasn't windy. It really wasn't. That's where a lot of the alleged things with Miller and everything else. I just didn't feel wind. I've been to games at Candlestick, we all have, where we were just downright cold. It was windy. You could feel it. I didn't have that memory of the '61 All-Star game. But I tell you, sharing what kind of the opposite of you on this, Jason, this was really my one and only opportunity to see in person American League stars. I sure remember Mantle and Colavito and Ford and all of those guys that I saw because, except for one game at Chavez Ravine, as it was known when the Angels played there in '63, I didn't see any American League games. I saw National League games. So that was one of the great memories of the All-Star game was the ability to actually see up close and personal these fellows that you would never see except on the small screen. But I do remember Mantle and Colavito and Ford and all of those guys, and not so much the National Leaguers because I had seen them. I saw the '84 All-Star game. I didn't sit in the cheap seats that time. Thanks to Bob Lurie, I sat in the Bank of America box, but that's a story for another day. But they were great seats. I did have a sport coat on. It did get cold, as I remember, towards the end of the '84 All-Star game. It was obviously sunny, we'll all remember, because that's what led, the late start. That's what led to so many of the consecutive strikeouts in that '84 All-Star game on it. Mays not being there, of course, so can't give you that one. But I would hope guys would chime in with what their memories were of games, all-star games that they've actually seen, because I agree with you, Jason. It's been depreciated in value. Money is involved, and that home run derby thing. I remember that in the '84 game. It was like people came and went. It was no big deal. And I don't know if the '84 game was the first home run derby or whatever, but it was not a it was not a marquee event. I can tell you that. I don't
I
even know if
don't.
it's televised.
Yeah, I don't even remember when it was restarted. Um, that that probably is a research article that somebody else could do. So you're Bay Area based, Bill?
I grew up in Palo Alto, and that's where all my friends are. But
Okay.
I live in very sunny and very warm Sun City, Arizona, or as we call it, Fun City. But it's hot as Hades today. But if you have to ask how hot it is, Jason, here, you know what that means? You're an out of town. We don't ask how hot it is.
Thank you, Bill.
You're welcome.
Mr. Norm, you are up.
Hey, Jason, thank you so much. First of all, I just want to point out, I believe that as far as Willie Mays batting leadoff, and someone can correct me, but I believe he volunteered to bat leadoff because he knew that there were so many hitters who could be bat third and fourth in the lineup, and he figured he'd be the best leadoff hitter. And so I think he did volunteer for that. Um, I agree with you, Jason, in terms of the exhibition part. Actually, I'm going to go backwards here. You reminded me, Jason, of 1968. And I did not go to that All-Star game. I was at summer camp. And I had a transistor radio. And the counselors at the camp had a little TV in their counselor cabin. And I hate that summer camp for the rest of my life because they would not let me in to watch the All-Star game. And so instead, I had my radio, just radio, and I circled their cabin the entire game, listening to the game, trying to make them feel guilty about not letting me in. So I heard that first inning on the radio, and it still sticks with me. Now I could misremember it because I was a kid, but I remember Mays getting on singling in the top of the first in the first inning. I don't know if it's top or bottom, but he got a base hit. I think he got picked off, but it was Willie Mays, and so he managed to get to second base anyway. And then he took third in a wild pitch, and the second batter walked, and McCovey hit a double play, and they scored the only run of the game. And Mays was made MVP of the game because of that. And because he created that run because he is so brilliant on the base paths. And so your presentation reminded me of that, which is a joy in my life. I don't think there was a home run derby in '84 because I remember I went to '78, '77 in Yankee Stadium, '78 in San Diego, and then '84 in San Francisco. And in '78 and '84, the day before the All-Star game, for free, fans could go to the ballpark and watch fielding practice followed by batting practice. And the fielding practice, both those days, was stupendous. Because you have these guys out there in the outfield with these arms where they'd just be uncorking these throws to third base and to home. And you realize these guys really were all-stars. And so that just made it great. In terms of what you were saying, Jason, about exhibition, All-Star game, I was there for the 2007 All-Star game also. Last night, I attended the game and saw the game end on a inside the park 3-run homer. And someone
Cool.
said, "Have you ever seen an inside the park home run before?" And at this ballpark, and I said, "Well, I missed one. I had to leave one game early, which I don't normally do, and I missed Angel Pagan's walk-off inside the park home run. But in the 2007 All-Star game, Ichiro hit an inside the park home run, and it was pretty fantastic, but not as good as last night's home run." But the point, I'm sorry I'm so long-winded, but the point of
No.
this story is that 2007 All-Star game was put the last nail in the coffin for me for All-Star games. I was there. It was a great game. It was extra innings. National League was behind. We had a chance to tie or win the game, and Albert Pujols was on the bench, the last bench player for the National League. And instead of bringing Tony La Russa, who was the manager of Pujols, instead of bringing Pujols into the game to pinch hit, he let Aaron Rowan hit to make the last out of the game. And that just told me what I've known for the previous 5 years was the All-Star game wasn't the game anymore. It didn't matter anymore whether who won or who lost the game. It was just go out and put these players in the field, let everyone play, and then protect my guy. Don't let him play at the end of the game. And that's why it's been ever since. And I think that's why the people today have been saying things about the All-Star game, not holding their interest, being queuing to watch the game. They'll watch the ceremonies, and then the game will be on, and no one will care what's going on. And I think
Right on, Norm. Right
I think
on.
that's what you were saying, Jason, about the exhibition.
Absolutely. I think that's right. I think you've touched on all of the elements of it. But, absolutely. Protecting your own guy is another one.
Okay, so thank you, Jason, for bringing back these memories for me. This is what makes our meeting special, I think, is when speakers like you come in and wake us up in terms of what we've seen in our lives.
Right.
Jason, I
yeah.
looked it up. I got the stub out. As usual, Norm is correct. It was actually the 1984 Major League Baseball All-Star Workout featuring the 13th annual Japan-USA College Baseball Championship Series. I remember seeing Mark McGwire. That's what I when I think back about it. It was the college all-stars, and I guess they were playing the Japan team, and
yes,
it was a whatever an all-star baseball workout is. It was a workout.
It was a great workout.
Thank you, Norm.
I mean that the sort of the history of like the sort of the All-Star game sideshows is the kind of article that somebody at Saber is sure to write at some point. And it's interesting because there used to be kind of like next to nothing. Like that year in Washington back in the late 60s and 69, they did it was a one-off that they did this sort of invitational banquet for the great players who are still alive from the golden era of baseball. But also Norm, your account of the first inning base running exploits of Willie Mays in 68 reminded me to say, that there are pretty long newsreel style highlights of almost all of these all-star games. I mean, starting in the 50s and going up through probably up through the present day, but there is a certain style to them that I think was derived from the old newsreels. And those are all on YouTube. And, we all have our moments of dead time where we're kind of killing time and stuff. I encourage any and all of you to, go back and watch those All-Star game highlight reels. You'll see a lot of Willie Mays. You'll see a lot of other players that you remember. It's very cool.
Sounds cool. Yeah.
John Burbridge, unmute, John.
Jason, thank you very much for bringing back memories of when the All-Star game was really the highlight of the baseball season back in the 50s and the 60s. I grew up in Jersey City as a Giants fan, and all the other kids on the block seemed to be Yankee fans. And the All-Star game was one game that I was able to toot my horn because the National League would prevail. Couldn't do it in the World Series because the Yankees always won. But the one thing I really enjoyed about the All-Star game is Willie Mays against Whitey Ford. He must have had a batting average of about 800 against Whitey Ford. And I think one of the reasons why he batted first was Ford was often the pitcher who started the World Series All-Star games for the American League. Did you touch on Whitey and Willie in your article? Again, I appreciate your bring back those great memories of All-Star games. Thank you.
Well, thank you for a great question. I mean, the answer is no, I didn't touch on it. Thanks to Retro Sheet and Baseball Reference, you can now go through game logs very, very easily and quickly. And I'm going to make a note to do that. I mean, obviously, Willie Mays would have only batted against Whitey Ford. He probably batted against him in the 51 World Series. The 62 World Series, was Whitey still pitching? Yeah, I think so, right? And then in the All-Star game. So I'd be very curious to know what his cumulative, regular, All-Star and postseason record was against Whitey. But I don't know. Sorry.
No, I almost tried to do the same thing as you just suggested to quantify that. It's just my feeling that he was just mastered Whitey Ford.
I believe you. I'm sure your impression is correct.
Yeah.
Thank you, John. Renee, you're up.
Thank you for you being here. I really appreciate everything you said. And, I feel the same way everybody else does. I mean, I remember loving the All-Star game. It was us against them. Nationally, I'm a National League guy, and it was great to see that. The what ifs. Seeing them for the first time. But for me, when interleague play, I saw everything. But for me, I'll never forget the last game I ever watched where I said, that's it, I'm done, was the game in Milwaukee. The game ended in a tie. I was watching I watched the whole game, and I was like, are you kidding me? I was talking to my television, and I remember how it ended that way. And I was already feeling the same way Norm has already felt, going into those games previously. So that was it for me. And year to year when it's on, maybe a couple innings here and there, find something else to watch and come back and see what happens. And really don't mind it anymore because it has been an exhibition game. There was something about, the National League playing against the American. I mean, it really was that. Not that anymore. It's not that anymore. Players don't feel that way. And it's the same thing in all the other sports, quite honestly. Basketball's the worst. Football, forget it. Basketball is like trying to make something out of nothing. So, baseball, the game I love so much, it was over after that for me, that Milwaukee game.
Thanks, Renee. Richard, you're up.
So Willie played in an American versus National League All-Star game in New Orleans. I think it was in 1985 in the Superdome. And, of course, he led off the game, hit a double, and then Hank Aaron followed with a home run. And so it was at a time when Louisiana was still trying to acquire a baseball team for the Superdome. Of course, they never did. But it was a way to get people excited about baseball in New Orleans again. But that was a pretty fond memory for me because you saw a lot of the old timer greats that played in that game. But he did lead off. He hit a double and scored on Aaron's home run.
So Richard, how old were they when they were playing?
How old was I?
No, how old was Aaron and Mays at that time?
Well, in 1984, what would it be? They were in their
They
probably
were in
their
their
50s.
they were in their early to mid 50s, right?
50s, I think. Yeah.
Right.
Oddly enough, Luke Appling hit a home run in that game, and he was ancient, right, at that time. I mean, he was. But I think Warren Spahn, Bob Feller pitched. Billy Williams, I think, was there. Frank Robinson, I believe, was there. So
Nice.
it was quite a game.
In that same era, they used to
You.
do a game
Okay.
like that in
Yeah,
Washington D.C. pretty regularly. You know, in between franchises here in the 35 years that we didn't have a team, and I think it probably lasted for about 10 years. But I think there was one where Luke Appling hit a game-winning home run too. So I didn't go to any of them.
As a side note about Aaron, he hit 3 home runs in games in New Orleans in 3 different decades. One was in the in this exhibition All-Star game in the 80s. In 1974, the year he broke Ruth's record, he played an exhibition game in New Orleans against the Baltimore Orioles and hit a home run. And then in 1955, I think, Mays brought a barnstorming team to New Orleans, and Heron was on that team, and he hit a home run on that one as well. So
Yeah, I'm going to give you a couple of my recollections. The only reason I watch the game now is I really love when they do the player introductions, and then I shut off the game. You know, I like seeing the Giants introduced. I love seeing Willie Mays, introduced with when they did the starting lineups with, McCovey and Aaron and Johnny Bench. I hate, another reason why I don't watch the game, there's usually a giant pitcher who gets selected and they usually get bombed and they're the losing pitcher. And it's very upsetting. So, I mean, even Logan Webb last year gave up 3 runs. I can't watch that. So I said in 1970, I saw the Fosse and Pete Rose incident, and I saw that live, and I was upstate in New York, and there was this place called the Casino. It was not a casino like gambling. That's where everybody is like a social hall. And the TV was really, really fuzzy with snow because there were no antennas back then. So a couple of years later, the owner sold and a new owner took over. And in 1973, they took the television and they put it outside for us kids to watch. And I remember it vividly because 2 of my favorite Giants were participants, Chris Spire and Bobby Bonds. And Bobby Bonds won the MVP. And I was really, I was 12 years old, but it really meant a lot to me. Now, really, I could care less. I just watch to see the introductions. And when, Torrey Hunter robs Barry Bonds and they're jumping on each other, that to me, that's just like what Renee said. It's just an exhibition. It used to mean something. So that's my opinion. We'll go to Howard and then Jeff. Howard, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I read recently, and unless I'm mistaken, a terrible commissioner of baseball has finally done something right. And the players are now going to be wearing their regular uniforms again, rather than National League, American League, beginning in the All-Star game of this year. I think in the special events like the Home Run Derby, they're going to be wearing like National League or whatever. But one of the best things about the introductions, we're seeing the players like Willie or the Mets or Mickey Mantle or whomever go out wearing their regular season uniform. And for some reason, the commissioner, with all these gimmicks he comes up with, did away with that a couple of years ago. I just read recently, I don't know if anybody else is aware of it or saw the article, but they are going to be going back to their regular uniforms for the game. So thank God the commissioner finally has done something right. And just to get back to an earlier point that everybody's been making, I also agree that these days it's like an exhibition game. And part of the problem is I just don't know the players anymore. I basically follow the National League with all this interleague play stuff now, little teams playing each other. You get familiar with some of the players. For the most part, I don't know any American League players. And when I was a kid, everybody knew Ted Williams and Mantle and Rocky Colavito and Yogi Berra and, Frank Robinson. nowadays I just don't know the American League players. So to me, it's like spring training. It's nothing more than a spring training game in the middle of July. So but I did enjoy the presentation tonight, Jason, and I really am glad that, and I don't know if you were aware of it, that they are going back to their uniforms starting next week. You'll see all the Mets wearing, who's out there wearing their Met uniforms, and the Yankees wearing theirs and Dodgers wearing theirs. That's the way it should be for baseball. The other sports don't really do that, but baseball has always done that, and it was a shame that it was taken away, but at least it's coming back now.
Thank you, Howard.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, thank you for the compliment about the presentation, but no, totally agree about the uniforms. And I haven't been following All-Star Game news close enough to know that they were bringing back the team uniforms. I'll say that when you're a fan of a bad team like the Nationals, it's like a thrill to see your player or players, they with the other really good players. I mean, I'll say that as far as like not knowing the players, I mean, with the leagues as big as they are now, I mean, not that they've increased, but you can't follow 30 teams. So I actually do appreciate being able to see some of the good players who kind of come up and, I would say like I used to live on the West Coast. Now I'm back on the East Coast. I don't really know the good players who were on the Western Division teams as much. So it's actually nice to see some of them.
Thank you, Howard. Jeff, you're up.
I have two comments I'd like to make. Also, before that, Jason, thank you very much. It's been very interesting. When I was a kid, I too went to sleepaway camp. And when it was All-Star, I think it was on either Saturday or Sunday when it was the All-Star game, there was an excitement in the camp, especially in the boys' camp, that today was the All-Star game. You could feel it even beginning with breakfast and through cleanup and whatever until the game came on. Oh, my God, it was so exciting. You don't have that today. Today, kids at camp probably don't even know that the All-Star game is being played for the most part. The other thing is I wanted to say is that in comparing players from different eras, as someone mentioned before, we're talking about who's the GOAT in baseball, the greatest of all time. It's so hard. It's so difficult. Babe Ruth out-homered entire teams. How could you say anybody was better than that? On the other hand, just watching Willie Mays, I don't care what his statistics were. If you they say Mickey Mantle was the fastest running to first base, but I bet you're going from first to third or home to second, Mays would beat him in a race. And the way he played the outfield, the flair he had, the way he swung the bat, to me, there's so much more than statistics that, to my mind, tells me that Willie was the greatest of all time.
Thank you, Jeff. Does anybody have a question who has not asked one yet? All right, we're going to wrap it up. Well, I know most of you won't be watching the game on Tuesday. But Jason, thank you so much for spending some time with us. Please don't be a stranger and let us know what's going on in your writing world, because this was great. Besides touching on Willie, we spoke about the All-Star game, which we'll get a chance next week also with Stu Thornley and Carl Hubble in the All-Star game. So why don't we give it up for Jason Horowitz? Jason, thank you so much. And again,
thank you all.
Jason's work in 5 Tools, Willie Mays, 5-tool player. So
I look forward to coming back. You put on a tremendous amount of really great, fascinating programming. So I'll be back.
You fit right in like a glove, Jason. Really did a great job. So we will see each other on next Wednesday. Until then, have a great weekend. I'm going to shut off the recording. If anybody wants to talk about the Giants All-Star game, whatever it is, we'll hang around for a while. So have a good night, everybody.
Good night.